Hello and welcome to Profiles in Risk. This is your host, Tony Cañas, and today I have with me Miguel Edwards, founder and principal at FiveM Consulting. Miguel, how's it going today?
Fantastic, Tony. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me. And it looks like you are in New Orleans, or at least the New Orleans area. We are recording...
For the time being, yeah. I'm just about 20 minutes north of New Orleans, across that big Lake Pontchartrain.
All right. So Louisiana, we are recording on April 29th, which I'm guessing is like already summer for you guys.
It's getting there. Not quite the dead of the summer. We get this kind of really nice time frame right before summer and obviously right after summer. About 2 to 3 months on either side of the summer that feel really, really good and you really enjoy it. But then once that summer heat kicks in, oh boy, it's pretty tough.
All right, awesome. So we always give the guests a chance to give the elevator pitch. What is FiveM Consulting?
Well, I think before I talk about FiveM, it's probably important to understand, kind of what my journey has been that had led me to FiveM. So 20 years in the insurance industry, mostly in the property and casualty space, but I did spend the last 7 years in the life and health space as well. But I've been on the broker side, been on the carrier side, and even spent a little bit of time on the solution provider side. But the last 7 years was a Carrier CIO at 2 different carriers. And one of the things that I learned a lot about was strategy, particularly as it relates to cloud migration and to data. And along the way, the other thing too that was kind of interesting, a fortunate opportunity I had was to join a college, the Lake Forest Graduate School of Management, where I'm an adjunct professor. And what I was able to do was find this really interesting intersection between academic frameworks and what works in the real business world. And so I bring all of that together, and most recently, a year ago, decided to take a leap into entrepreneurship. And see if I could put what I've learned over the past 20 years of insurance to work. And what I was trying to do was to kind of fill a little bit of a gap, a little bit of a void that I saw in the consulting space, where obviously you've got your big four consultants, you've got your tier 2 consultants, and they're going after the big companies, a lot of the big companies and carriers that I grew up in, where I learned a lot of what I would consider magic of technology leadership and strategy. But I figured there's an opportunity to bring some of that to the smaller carrier segment, to the mutuals of the world, to that carrier space, figure like 100 to 600 million in premium, where those are the folks that are meeting some very, very niche requirements in the industry. Yet they don't get the benefit of the kind of the big carrier strategies, nor do they necessarily have the financial wherewithal to afford the big four consultants, et cetera. And then married to that is a little bit of a different approach, where everybody on my team, and we're now six deep now, so we've got a nice sizable team where we're doing some good delivery. None of us on our team are consultants. We all come from industry, and in fact, we're learning to be consultants. But what we know intimately is we understand insurance operations, we understand insurance technology, and we're really focused on really kind of changing the game and not necessarily delivering 300-page PowerPoint decks that kind of articulates some type of approach that is kind of some sort of recommendation, but instead really going in and understanding what a carrier's business objectives are. And what are some of the things that we have learned over the course of our experience in our individual careers that we could bring to bear as examples, as proven approaches to help carriers really achieve those things and achieve them quickly, achieve them incrementally. I'm not interested in projects that last, 2-3 years long. At the end of the day, what we see in this changing environment is you can't plan that far out. Instead, what are the things that you're looking for to get done in the next, call it 6 to 9 months? What are some of the things that we could do, somewhat immediately?
All right, fantastic. That is a great background, and I do really like the approach. The large players in the industry are obsessed with the McKinseys of the world and the Lloyds of the world, but yeah, those are very, very expensive. Often brought in more to back the CEO on what they've already decided they want to do, and not so much to actually figure out the strategy on how to do it. And their very expensive plans often get put on the shelf and not actually made, right? This is not the reason they were brought in to begin with. So I love that space that you're trying to target of the smaller carriers that could really benefit from a real, I really want to say a real strategic strategy, but a real structured strategy, the eyes of an experienced third party that understands insurance and understands insurance technology, without the multi-million-dollar expense of a tier 1 or 2 consulting firm. So yeah, this makes a ton of sense for me, to me. Now there's also the implementation consultants, I can't think of their names, but like you buy Guidewire and then you hire one of them to actually handle the implementation. How do you guys play with that type of firm?
Yeah, so our expertise, with the exception, there's one exception that I'll get into, but our expertise is really more on the management consulting side.
Perfect.
We don't play too much in the delivery space, except for one exception that I'll talk about. But so we would partner with those SIs that specialize more in the implementation of core systems and some of those other things, and we would partner with them in the context of providing a kind of a strategic framework for where that implementation needs to go. So, for example, we're prioritizing the products that would get onboarded onto a core system, or maybe prioritizing certain things around workflow, around claims, or workflow around billing, workflow around policy administration, distribution management, things like that. Helping the implementer, understand whatever unique nuances may exist within a particular carrier as it relates to their products or their distribution, perhaps, IA versus captive, those types of things, or maybe direct to consumer. So that's kind of how we play. And I think there's a lot of synergistic opportunity there. But there's one exception, and that exception has to do with the Salesforce space. So I'm a Salesforce junkie. I've done 5 enterprise implementations of Salesforce within the insurance context. And part of what I wanted to do was really, and I've got lots of content that I produce as well, Tony, that talk about the opportunity to go into really more no and low code types of solutions that could be deployed more quickly. And Salesforce is a great example of that. And so what I wanted to do to get a little bit of delivery chops, because obviously with a 6-person shop, it's really hard to say you do Salesforce delivery and implementation. I partnered with a company called Fortimize, and Fortimize is run by a guy named Danny Varghese, who's a good friend of mine, and also to a guy who's been responsible for a number of my successful implementations as a CIO. And we've have a strategic alliance where we work together to basically bring Salesforce to insurance carrier operations. And so I do all of the strategy support around that, and then Fortimize does the actual delivery. So that's the only place that we really kind of try to do both ends of it, and there's a good complement, a good symbiosis there.
Okay, so what does the perfect client for you guys look like? So you did talk about kind of that middle and small side, especially mutuals. But
yes,
is it the what other characteristics does the perfect client for you guys have?
It's a great question, and one of the things I would say is that one of the reasons why the mutual and that small client is so attractive to us is because they can turn on a dime. They're small companies that have a specific purpose. It might be geographic, it might be industry or a class code niche. It might be that type of thing. But they're carriers that can very, very quickly get after a strategic shift, a strategic change. You juxtapose that to the large national carriers, and you said it. A lot of times the strategy just gets on shelves because you've got to convince a lot of people on your strategy before they move, right? And and I've lived in that direction as well. I can't tell you when working for big carriers, can't tell you how often I've come up with strategic plans, even as an internal consultant, that just sat there on the shelves. And so instead, these smaller mutuals, typically we're engaged by someone at the C-level, often it's the CEO, who has a drive to get something done, has a drive to solve a specific problem, to attack a certain market. And we want to be there to really help with that transformation and help with that quickly. So our perfect customer is really someone who has some idea, some concept, some strategic objective that they want to get after in the short term that we can be part of and help in that success. So that's what we look for, and that's typically who reaches out to us. And for example, we've got a client that decided that they want to expand into additional lines of business and additional states, but was concerned with, for example, the seasoning requirements of moving into new lines of business. So we conceived an entire project to help them build an MGA within their carrier, to a carrier-owned MGA where they could go out and serve their customers with additional lines of business, but leveraging non-manufactured product, leveraging product on someone else's paper. So that helps them provide that value proposition of bundled solutions, but not without having to take the capital risk. So that's one example. We've got another carrier that decided that they wanted to move heavy into the direct-to-consumer space, selling a particular line of business. And then so we help them with that product strategy, and also to help them with the technology strategy to now develop a direct-to-consumer capability. So that's an example. And so they're very strategic, but very quick to implement things that we can really bring success in a very short amount of time. You're on mute, Tom.
Looks like you started FiveM in the last year.
Yeah.
So you just talked about the different companies that the type of companies that you're seeing great success with. Any of those projects already finished?
Yeah, so the one that I described around the MGA, yeah, we completed that strategy, and that was a great success. And we're learning along the way, and we're not ashamed to say that, right? Again, when we come in and we have conversations with clients or prospective clients, one of the things that we're very transparent about is that we're insurance professionals, and we are learning the consulting game. And we're learning to be good consultants. Matter of fact, one of the things that I require all my new hires to do is read a book by a guy named Rob Berg at PIR. He wrote a book called The Courageous Consultant, and that has become our Bible recently on how to become a good consultant. It's a good starting point, but the value prop for us and the differentiating factor for us is that we start as industry professionals. And believe that it's a lot easier to learn how to be a consultant than it is to learn how to become an industry professional. And so we marry those two things together. Although I will tell you, though, that we are learning that there is a lot of nuance to being a consultant. There's an awful lot of nuance to how to do that. And one of the things, maybe we can get into a little later, Tony, but learning, going from being a carrier executive to a small business owner / entrepreneur, that in and of itself has been a mammoth learning curve for me. One that I'm enjoying quite a bit, but it's really a fascinating and steep learning curve.
Right, you said a few interesting things there. So I've always agreed with the insurance industry's view that what we do is very unique, even compared to financial services. Right, our balance sheet is backwards. It's the opposite of your normal financial services, right? And if you don't come from insurance, it's hard to get your head around that. Now, consultants, traditional consultants, are generally brilliant, generally coming from top schools, and trained in very systematic ways to very quickly learn an industry that they're going to do a project for, and they do that well. But what we do is so unique, right?
Yes.
That I love the idea of consultants coming from us, from the insurance side. Have you found that the clients that you're targeting are accepting of this model of you guys are not traditional consultants? Are they reticent, or are they excited to have access to management consulting that gets their business and that is not ungodly expensive compared to the size of their companies?
I would say, I would answer you like this, Tony, is that there's this kind of interesting arc that occurs where when I first engage with a prospective client, I feel like they are refreshed that they get to talk to someone who has actually has practical experience doing the things that they are looking to do. Oftentimes I can get into a conversation and I can say, let me tell you where I went wrong when I tried this. That's not something you typically hear from a consultant. Typically, the consultant's going to say, these are all the things that we have done, and this is how cool we are, and we've got all that piece. But I can say, let me tell you about the mistakes that I made going down this path that hopefully I can help you avoid making. That's a very, very refreshing conversation to have. But then all of a sudden, as we kind of start to engage, then the customer is like, well, all of the things that they were expecting in terms of the depth and the glossiness of the proposals and the crispness of the estimates and all of those are things that we're learning. We're learning how to do those things. And then it's to say, really, if you give us a shot, we can show you a little bit about where we come from. And we're getting better with every engagement. We're getting better at crisp proposals. But at the end of the day, that's not my selling point. My selling point is being able to bring subject matter expertise that is true and authentic to the table at very reasonable rates, allow us to get to know you, allow you to get to know us, and then you get to experience what it's like to work with basically an extension of your team is really what we become. We become an extension of your strategic and your strict extension of your leadership team. So then we go back to like, wow, this makes sense. And everything that we do, we want to tie to some type of business value. We're not interested in just producing decks. We're interested in actually creating business value. And in fact, I've turned down business where I didn't really find an opportunity where I would be able to say, I can get you a win in 6 months. I can get you a win in 8 months that looks like this. And so, that's really kind of
in our world.
Yeah, it's a very, very interesting opportunity. And a lot of that, by the way, also too, Tony, comes from, I'm an agilist in terms of an agile methodology. And so I like to try to take what I learned in software development from an agile perspective, and I bring a lot of those contexts to the business around a minimum viable product. How do we prove that this is going to work before I ask you for loads of investment? Let's POC this thing. Let's take some small risk. Let's see if the market accepts what we're talking about. And I think, again, there's an appreciation for that type of approach. There's definitely an appreciation for that type of approach.
All right. You mentioned that the transition from insurance executive to entrepreneur and consultant to the industry. I'd love to hear what's been surprising, what you've learned thus far.
Yeah, so what I guess is not maybe necessarily terribly surprising, but just difficult to manage is when you're a small business owner, all of a sudden things are a little bit different because the money is yours. Right now you're looking at the sales cycle because you fund the sales cycle with your own money. It's my retirement dollars that fund my work and my partner's work in going through the process of engaging with the customer, and then selling a deal. And then there's all kinds of logistical things like, so for example, I bill my customers 30 days in arrears and they take 30 days to pay me. And meanwhile, so that's 60 days where I'm floating payroll for my team. And that is, again, those are some things that I guess they don't tell you when you wake up one morning. The gods don't tell you when you wake up one morning and say, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. They don't tell you, well, you better pucker up because it's going to be an interesting ride while you're waiting to get paid. So those things are kind of interesting. And then there's a lot of the administration that goes on behind the scenes, building your own job aids and creating onboarding documents. And these are all things that I had massive teams at my corporation to do that now I'm doing it all. But I will tell you that on the other side of that, though, being so close and in touch with the work, it really is super refreshing because it goes beyond now just, kind of building, kind of strategy, but it's also to how do you actually execute on this? How do you implement this? And then being part and parcel of the implementation. And then the last thing that I would tell you that was not necessarily surprising, but really fun to see in execution is the ability for me to build and own a culture. And one of the things, and if you talk to anybody who knows me and you ask them what my leadership brand is, they probably sick of me saying it, but I believe in leading with love, and that's how I approach my team. When I hire for cultural fit, and then I hire for expertise. And that cultural fit is super important to me because I want to be able to hire and work with people who are interested in growing this thing, who are interested in being part of the FiveM family. We call ourselves FiveMers, and we get on the call every 2 weeks. We talk about what did we learn. We try to share knowledge across our team. I said, that we bring people from industry. I also bring people who are very, very young and perhaps not necessarily ready for a particular role. And I want to stretch them because I want to grow those individuals. And I get a lot of enjoyment, a lot of passion out of helping other people grow in their career. And I believe that just the byproduct of that approach is incredible business value. It is incredible loyalty to the cause. And then by extension, we deliver great products and great results for our customers because of that approach. So I love being able to own that. And it wasn't something that I was always able to do in a big corporate setting where, you're a cog in a big machine. And yeah, you might want to create your own culture within your department, which yes, you absolutely can, but there's still an overarching culture that may or may not fit with your own personal direction. And now I got the whole thing. So it's a lot of fun.
There's a lot there that I really liked. And I love that you're being intentional about creating that culture.
Yeah.
Because yeah, it's now or never. A culture will develop.
Mm-hmm.
You can either intentionally build it to be what you want, or it will develop, right? Like it might not be what you want. And hiring has a big piece to do with that. The leading with love part, I'm a big believer that we significantly underuse the word love within the business world, right? Like historically, not a lot of Harvard Business Review articles, right? Not a lot of, yeah, not it just does not get used a lot, and I think that's a missed opportunity. And now we're really caught, like where my brain is going is traditional consultants
Mm-hmm.
are the exact opposite of that. What I mean by that is traditional consultants. Again, I was never a Big Four consultant, but I read a couple books about how they work, and my understanding is basically it's all about the numbers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Period. Right. It's all about, you almost abstract yourself out of the work and come up with the most exact answers based on the
Sure.
customer data, right? You come up with the most exact analysis based on
Mm-hmm.
their data and industry data. And yeah, the feelings should play no part of that. You're taking the
Mm-hmm.
exact opposite approach, building a place where we love working at, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and where we care for each other like a family, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and that should result, it absolutely
Yes.
should result in consultants that really care,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
And are less afraid to trust their instincts. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, it's a very, very interesting approach. Are there, as far as you're aware, other boutique consulting firms that take a similar approach, or is this a Miguel Edwards original idea.
I would be shocked, Tony, if it was an original idea.
Yeah.
You know, it's just born out of who I am as a leader. And by the way, make no mistake, I look at margin every day. I look at my P&L every day. I've got to look at my billings. I build incentive plans to make sure that we're hitting our numbers, right? So it's not to suggest that I'm not looking at numbers at all, but it's
Mhm.
not what I lead with. But it is an absolute essential. Because look, at the end, like I got 3 kids I have to put through college still. You know, I've got one guy at University of Arizona, and one's going to UCLA. I've got a lot of money I got to pay for here, and so I've got
UCLA
to
is
make.
not going to be cheap.
It's not going to be cheap, no. So I've got to make money, that is for sure. And also, too, my people need to make money as well. They need to be compensated. So it's not to say at all that I'm not running a business. This is not a charity. But when I say lead with love, the key for me is, and I break that down into and you're right. In corporate, it's a taboo word. You're not allowed to say that. HR come at you, right? But what
Exactly.
I think about love as basically care and intention. That's how I look at it. And so, how do I care for people, and how are we intentional about everything that we do for and with each other? And at the end of the day, to your point about the other consulting model, I'm not looking to basically get as much blood from a stone as possible out of my folks. That's not what I'm looking for, because I also don't believe that that's how you produce the best work. I think that there is really good and something to be said for bringing in professionals that have experience, and then they basically come off the road, if you will, and they're interested in working for an organization that has care and intention for them and their career. We
Mhm.
work hard, by the way, Tony. I mean, we work hard.
Absolutely.
There are days where there are weeks where there's 60-hour weeks, but you know what? I'm not driving that. That's being driven by themselves because they have care and intention for where this company is going. And so again, by focusing really on really that care and intention, I can get that reciprocity from my folks because we're building something together. And by the way, it's an important part of our pitch in trying to attract talent. I mean, how else do I get a professional to join this tiny little startup that's only a year old? There's got to be a value proposition there,
Mhm.
right? And so part of how we attract that talent,
Differentiator.
value proposition around what this is going to look like, what we're building, how we believe that we're all going to contribute to building this enterprise of, hopefully we can call it an enterprise soon, that we were all part of. And that's really the dynamic there that I'm after.
It makes sense. It absolutely makes sense to me. What are the clients saying of the service that you're providing?
Yeah, one of the things that I typically get after a conversation is an appreciation for the candor. I think about the consultants that I've hired and worked with over the course of my career, and I've worked with a lot of them, and all of the big brands. And there were some really interesting, rare exceptions that I would call out as basically the folks who were instrumental in my career. There were just some really, really fascinating folks that I met along the way. And I thought about what was it that made them different? I mean, they were Big Four consultants, but there was something different about that one partner that really made a difference on a project for me that ultimately drove career success for me. And what that was really incredible candor around an idea that I had, that they would come to me and say, Miguel, that's just not going to work. And then I've had consultants, by the way, that were afraid to tell me that and instead just wrote the SOW. And they're just going to bill me T&M and we're going to see what happens. And then we're going to drive that project right to failure. And so I thought about how I wanted to comport myself. And I said, I want to be one of those consultants that had material impact on another executive's career. And then so that's how I approach it, is with extreme candor and when possible, a can-do attitude to how we can make something happen. And so conversations, that I leave, I typically get, Miguel, thanks for your candor on that. And I've learned, again, through learning how to be a consultant, and some of this came from that book that I described, The Courageous, it's like how to really listen to what a customer wants, to what a customer is asking for, I should say. Sometimes it's what they want, sometimes it's not what they want, sometimes it's not what they need. But how to ask all of the right questions, being very, very intentional about understanding what all of the dynamics are around that ask, and then being very, very thoughtful about ways in which you can push back and provide alternatives, ways in which you can offer up an opinion around feasibility, and then how do you get at, you know, actual plans that they can sink their teeth into. But I think, you know, customers are responding, they're responding pretty well to it. And you know, and I think also too, there's a certain demeanor that we try to bring to the table where we try to, you know, turn down the temperature a little bit when we feel like, you know, tensions are high to get certain things done. We want us to take a step back and make sure it gives. I'm all about speed. I'm all about go. I'm about go, go, go. But I want to do that once I truly understand where we're going, and then we can move really super fast. So I think our customers by and large are really digging our approach.
That's fantastic. Makes perfect sense to me. I love the idea of what you're doing. Yeah, awesome. Thank you for coming on the show today. It's been very, very interesting. I really like the approach, and I can absolutely see how there's a space in the market for this kind of former insurance executives
Yeah.
who have done this before, but providing it in a consultant format.
Yep.
And at a price point that's not going to break a small company.
100.
So yeah,
Yep.
thank you very much for your time. When this goes live, I will tag both you and the company on LinkedIn, and looking forward to see you around. And couple of years, love to have you back to tell some more stories of how the firm has grown, and the projects that you've successfully brought home for small and medium-sized carriers.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time, Tony. I really
My
appreciate it.
pleasure.
All right. Bye-bye now.